Hi everyone, Cobweb Rose here, and today I want to bring you another part of my AT section series. So I'm going to start this one off as AT for LASHers. So anybody that's looking to do longer sections, things that you can't do over a long weekend, might take you a week, might take you more than a week, but if you're looking to start or just looking for your next section for your lash, I hope this will help you out. Okay, so going from south to north again, from Georgia to Maine, I have again awarded some trail superlatives, if you will, for different sections of the AT. So this first one I like to call Ponies and Trail Towns, and it is, you guessed it, the Grayson Highlands section. So this section either starts or finishes, depending on which direction you want to hike, in Damascus, Virginia, and ends in Marion, Virginia. Now this is a 63.6 mile section. You do get to start or finish, depending on which direction you're hiking, in Trail Town, USA, or Damascus, Virginia, which is around mile 470. You get to hike a portion of the Virginia Creeper Trail, which is also a bike path. You get to climb Buzzard Rock and get beautiful views from there. You get to go through the Fat Man Squeeze in the Grayson Highlands, which is just a fun little kind of tight, cavey section of the AT. And then of course the Grayson Highlands themselves, which if you have seen anything about the AT, I'm sure you have seen the section where hikers can walk right up to wild ponies, and this is that section. You also get to see the famous Partnership Shelter, which is a beautiful shelter right behind the Mount Rogers headquarters, where you can order pizza to the shelter and take a solar shower if you would like. Now from the Mount Rogers headquarters, you can also hitch or shuttle into Marion, Virginia, which is trying to make its way to being the next Trail Town, USA, and Marion Outdoors and the Mary Hiker Inn Hostel is there as well. So it's a great little section. I've done it 3 times in total, 2 section hikes and 1 time on my through hike of the Appalachian Trail, and I can 10 out of 10 recommend this as a great section to do. Now, I'm sure you guys have all heard about the Shenies, and the Shenies kind of start at Rockfish Gap at mile marker 864.6 and basically ends around Front Royal, Virginia at mile marker 972.4. Now, just so you guys know, I am using the 2024 far out mileage because they update it when the trail lengthens and shortens every year depending on reroutes. Now, this section right now is 107.8 miles, so definitely not necessarily a weekend warrior hike, but if you're feeling ambitious, you could finish it in a week. And I definitely recommend that you hit some of these highlights when you're hiking through the Shenandoahs. The Bare Fence Rock Scramble, it's actually a little blue blaze. You're not skipping a whole lot of the white blazed trail, but it is a really fun rock scramble with beautiful 360 views of the Shenies. Now, when you go through Shenandoah, you can do a few different things that are still considered hiking the Shenandoahs in the through hiking community. One of them is to walk the Yellow Blaze. In other words, you're not taking a car down Skyline Drive, but you are walking the Shenandoahs through Skyline Drive. Now, the reason a lot of people do this and kind of accept it as part of a through hike is because originally when the trail was put through Shenandoah National Park, it was supposed to ride exactly where the Skyline Drive is now. So a lot of hikers want to take that section for the views because you don't get as many beautiful views when you're hiking the AT where it is now through the Shenies. Now, a lot of people also like to aquablaze the Shenies. In other words, take primarily a canoe down the Shenandoah River, and that's also another one of those ways that's kind of accepted as you've still done a through hike even if you aquablaze the Shenies. So a couple of different options here for you guys if you're looking for a different experience that isn't strictly walking through the Shenies. Now, the Shenandoahs kind of spoil you as a hiker because you can kind of hop in and out of trail at different waysides throughout the park. Definitely try their blackberry flavored items during the summertime. Hiking the Shenies, though, does require a paid permit now. It used to be free, but it is a paid backcountry permit, so make sure you're getting that ahead of time online before you start your hike through the park. Now, the Shenies can be crowded, especially in the summertime, because it is a huge tourist destination. And honestly, the trails are what I call tourist trails. So they're very well graded, they're nicely groomed, and they usually have a lot of people on them. Now, that being said, your first day hiking in from Rockfish Gap in the Shenies sucks. It is a lot of hill climbing in exposed areas, not a lot of water. It's just That was one of my least favorite days on trail, was the first one I spent in the Shenies. But once you start hitting those waysides and getting into those nice levelly tourist trails, it gets a lot better and it gets a lot more fun. Now, when you first walk into the Shenies, you'll also see the famous painted tractor seats with a view of absolutely nothing, but they're there. And of course, you get to end in a very cute trail town, Front Royal, and there is a trolley apparently driven by a slightly crazy trolley driver that will pick you up from the trailhead and take you into town. And Front Royal is one of those towns that has a kind of a hiker center where you're able to camp in town, get a shower and things like, and do your laundry, things like that. They also have an Outfitters, coffee shop, and a couple of great restaurants. Be sure to try the Apple House, and I think it's CJ's ice cream, CNC, something like that. Something that starts with a C, but their ice cream is really good. So definitely recommend a hike of the Shenies at some point in your hiking career. Okay, now for those of you who are hungry to cross some states off your list, this next section I'm going to tell you about will help you cross a whole bunch of them off your list. So this is our little most states superlative. So you start in Virginia and you end in Pennsylvania. Now, a lot of you, if you've heard about different challenges that you can complete on the AT, have probably heard of the 4-state challenge. And this is when a thru hiker starts at the border of West Virginia and Virginia and hikes all the way through to the border of Maryland and Pennsylvania in a single 24-hour period. It's about 45 miles when you do it that way as the 4-state challenge. That was not something I did when I went through on my hike because it sounded miserable, and it still sounds miserable to me. So I would recommend doing this as a section or breaking it up into multiple days if you're thru hiking. Now, I'd recommend starting at Virginia Route 7 at Snickers Gap because there's a nice big parking lot next to the road there, and it's mile marker 1006.5. Now, you will end up hiking a small bit at the end of the Virginia roller coaster, but trust me guys, you're skipping the real long hard part of it, and you'll end in Penmar Park at mile marker 1067.3. Now, I will stipulate that would be a good ending point because there's parking at the park, but the actual Mason-Dixon line where you cross from Maryland into Pennsylvania is 0.3 miles past Penmar Park. So you will have to do like a little, basically half-mile round trip to get to that border crossing and back again. And the reason I tell you not to necessarily go past that is because there's basically just a couple of road crossings after that and not really good parking. So this is just my personal recommendation, but that'll give you a 60.8 mile section to complete. You get to go through the beautiful Raven Rocks right at the end of the Virginia roller coaster. You get to walk through 4 states. You start in Virginia, you go through West Virginia, you go through Maryland, and then you end in Pennsylvania. You can see the Blackburn AT Center, which is, it's like Virginia, I think it's at the end of Virginia, right before West Virginia. You can go to the Harper's Ferry and the iconic ATC headquarters where thru hikers get their photos taken in front of that beautiful whitewashed stone building. You can see the original Washington Monument in Maryland, which is actually really cool and has a lot of history that you can read leading up to it, and then a beautiful view from the top. And you can also see the lovely Penmar Park where you can order food to be delivered to you or catch a hitch into town to resupply or end your section hike. And then of course you get to see the iconic Mason-Dixon line where you cross from Maryland into Pennsylvania. Okay, so a while back I got a request from someone asking about what's kind of an easy section of the AT that I can hike, because I hike the Whites all the time, so there's a lot of elevation gain and loss. So give me a section that I can tackle that requires minimal effort. Here's that section, guys. In my opinion, this is the flattest section you will find on the entire Appalachian Trail. Now, it starts at mile marker 1067.3. That's Penmar Park, which you'll remember from our last section is where I recommended leaving off, and that's in Maryland, and goes to Duncannon, Pennsylvania at mile marker 1149.8. This is an 82.5 mile section of the quote-unquote flattest trail that you'll find on the AT. Now, recognize there is still elevation gain and loss here, but it's a lot less than what you find in other places on the trail. And of course, like I said in my last section, you get to cross that iconic Mason-Dixon line. You start in Maryland and you'll end in Pennsylvania, so you do get to hike in 2 states. You get to go through the actual mileage halfway point of the trail, as well as hit Pine Grove Furnace, which is the home of the half-gallon challenge if you're feeling froggy. You also get to walk through some beautiful farm fields. You go directly through the town of Boiling Springs. Cafe 101 is excellent. And then you get to see the historic Darlington shelter and its massive privy. And this shelter was built by Earl Schaefer, who, if you guys have heard of AT history, you will know is the first gentleman to have recognized a through hike on the AT. And then you'll end in Duncannon, which you've probably heard of the historic Doyle Hotel. Well, that is its home. It's also home to my favorite ice cream place on trail, 3B's Ice Cream. So it's definitely worth a little look-see, and you get to see some nice views and experience flatter trail than the majority of the rest of the AT through this section. Okay, so I wasn't really sure what superlative to give this next section, so I just called it Highlights Massachusetts. It starts at Undermountain Road in Connecticut at mile marker 1507.5. This is just a nice little pull-off parking area in the middle of a pine forest, and there's a privy right when you pull into the parking lot. And it's like half a mile from one of the towns in Connecticut that, to be honest, I don't remember which one, but it's an easy on-off to the trail. And then it ends in Bennington, Vermont at mile marker 1618.0. So this is a 110.5 mile stretch of trail. Now, in this section, you get to hike up and over Bear Mountain, Connecticut, not to be confused with New York, and this is the highest point in Connecticut. It's a bit of a rock scramble up and down the mountain as I remember it, and then it's just got this like big giant pile of rocks on top with a nice view. You also get to see a lot of waterfalls at the Connecticut-Massachusetts border. It's a really pretty area of trail, and then you get to see Mount Race's Ledges, which has an absolutely gorgeous expanse, and this is after you enter Massachusetts. And then you get a little baby taste of the Whites climbing up Mount Everett, which is one of the tallest mountains in Massachusetts, I believe, but it doesn't have really any view at the top. The highlight is kind of climbing it because it has the floating stairs and the rocks and just some hand-over-hand stuff. So it's a good time. It's a little Whites preview. You can also go into Great Barrington, Massachusetts, which is a big town. It's primarily a tourist town, but it's honestly a lot of fun to stop in at, and the community center offers free tenting for thru hikers on their property, and you can get into the center for, I think it's like $8 to shower, use their pool, whatever you want to do the next day or the day you get there if they're open. You also get to go through this beautiful little section of trail called the Ice Gulch, and it has just it's just a really stunning like little valley in the middle of the woods, and I found it quite beautiful. You'll also get to see the iconic AT Trail Stand, which is the little red barn-looking structure that's about the size of a shower that sells popsicles and sodas and has Wi-Fi, and it's just a great little spot to stop and break up your day for a little bit. You can also swing by Upper Goose Pond Cabin, which is that beautiful iconic red barn-shaped shelter that has actual place to sleep inside of the shelter in bunks. It has caretakers, it's got a couple of privies, tenting platforms, and it's on the beautiful Upper Goose Pond, which is just this pristine lake. It's gorgeous. They've got canoes you can take out. You can go swimming. 10 out of 10 recommend to stop there. You can also stop in and see the Northern Cookie Lady, a lady named Ruth. She makes cookies for thru hikers, lets you hang out on her property, and does like a work in exchange for food and stay on the property as well. And she's a very, very sweet lady. Definitely stop in there if you're hiking through Massachusetts. It's worth it. You also walk straight through the town of Dalton, Massachusetts, and Cheshire, Massachusetts. In Cheshire is the home of the Father Tom campsite, which is actually a little thru hiker campsite right in town. It's got a nice water spigot, a little hiker box, and volunteers who run it and come in and check in on the hikers in the nicest way possible. So it's a great little spot. You climb up and over Mount Greylock, which I believe is the highest mountain in Massachusetts. It's got a little lodge at the top and a tower that you can climb and get 360 views of the surrounding area. Now, you'll also conquer hiking in 3 states during this section. You start in Connecticut, you go through all of Massachusetts, and then you end in Vermont. You also can end your hike in a very nice trail town, Bennington, Vermont. It is about a 6-mile hitch in from the end of the trail, but it's on a road that you could easily be picked up by a shuttle, and Bennington is just a great town. If you go in there, try the Blue Bend Diner, stay at the Catamount Motel. It's a great little spot. So definitely recommend doing this little highlights of Massachusetts section if you've got the time. So a little history for you about the trails in the US. The kind of original through hiking trail was the Long Trail in Vermont, which still runs from the Massachusetts border to the Canadian border through the Green Mountains of Vermont. Now, when you hike the Appalachian Trail shares trail with the Long Trail for, I think it's 105.5 miles, give or take, each year. So this section of trail is kind of almost exactly what the AT shares with the Long Trail. And it's a beautiful section to hike because you're hiking through a very historic trail, the precursor of the Appalachian Trail. And also it's just absolutely gorgeous scenery through this section. And you'll probably also collide with not just AT through hikers, but also LT through hikers during your trip through this section. Now, I would recommend starting in Bennington, Vermont at mile marker 1618.0. Now, this is about 15 miles after the actual border where Massachusetts becomes Vermont, but it's a little harder to do an on-off at that border site because you have to hike into the border to start. There's no like little side trail that just goes right up there. Like, it's an actual hike in. And I would recommend ending at Vermont Route 100 at mile marker 1711.5. Now, this is about 2.3 miles past the main junction where the Long Trail splits off and the AT continues on towards New Hampshire. Now, this is a 93.5 mile section, and you could expand it to start earlier and actually do the entirety of the Long Trail that's shared with the AT if you want. It's completely up to you. Now, in this section, like I said, apart from it being absolutely gorgeous trail, you actually get to see a couple of different fire towers. You can see Glastonbury Mountain Fire Tower. They have removed the ladder at the bottom, and it's not legal to climb up the tower anymore, but it is a pretty spot. You can still climb up Stratton Mountain Fire Tower, and that has beautiful views of the mountains surrounding you. You can stop in at Manchester Center, Vermont, which is a really easy hitch from the highway, and also has a pretty great burger joint, and the VFW allows AT through hikers to camp behind it for free. But there's also a couple of nice hostels there that you could potentially get a spot in. Now, you get to hike out of Manchester Center area up Bromley Mountain, which is historically a ski mountain in the winter time, and get those beautiful views from the top. You get to walk through the rock garden and White Rocks area where they have all these beautiful stagged white cairns that have been created by hikers of years past. You can walk the suspension bridge over Clarendon Gorge, which is beautiful in and of itself. The suspension bridge is very tall and real sketch, but definitely worth the hike. You can also hike over Mount Killington, and you can go into Killington, Vermont. You can go into Rutland, Vermont, which is the home of the famous AT cult, the Yellow Deli. And you get to go up to the Lookout Shelter if you'd like to do a little side quest. And that's that like 2-story house looking shelter that has a long ladder up to an observation platform on top where you could cowboy camp or just go up and relax and enjoy the view. You also get to do a single solitary ladder down a rock face, which is a lot of fun. But also, Vermont is not called Vermud for nothing, so prepare to have some muddy feet through this section. Some years are worse than others. Honestly, I found more mud in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Maine than I did in Vermont when I thru hiked in 2023, but it varies year to year, and some mudding seasons are a lot worse than others. So just be aware you might be a little messy for this section. Okay, this next section is challenge time, guys. I'm talking the whites. So this section, honestly, from what I remember from my AT thru hike, this is hard. This is like really freaking hard, whether you have trail legs or not. You start at New Hampshire Route 25 near Glencliff, New Hampshire. It's mile marker 1798.3, and you end at US Route 2, which is mile marker 1898.9, and is right up the road from Gorham, New Hampshire. This is 100.6 miles of some of the hardest trail on the Appalachian Trail, but you are going to hit literally all the highlights. Beautiful views if you can catch a weather window. You will go up and over Mount Moosilauke, which has an absolutely gorgeous view from the top. beautiful waterfall down the backside. It's challenging, it's fun. It is busy with tourists though. That's a big, the Whites is kind of just all busy with tourists. You'll find a lot of people out there. You get to go up and over the Kinsmans, which is a lot of fun and involves a lot of hand over hand climbing and some real sketchy trail. You can go into one of the various huts along the route. There are lots of huts in the area. You can stay there if you want to pay big money. Or you can just stop in and see if they have leftovers, or see if you can get some soup or a hot drink or something while you're there. You can go into Lincoln, New Hampshire, and if you're feeling the slack packing life, or you'd like a little more information about how to get through the Whites when you are through hiking it as a section, or when you're through hiking it on the Appalachian Trail, I recommend staying or stopping in at the Notch Hostel, which is near the town of Lincoln. It's a great stay, 10 out of 10 recommend that hostel. It's an excellent spot. Now, when you get back into the Whites again, you will be hiking over Little Haystack, Mount Lincoln, Mount Lafayette, Mount Garfield, Galehead Mountain, South Twin, Mount Goyette, Zealand Mountain, Zealand Falls. You will see those near the Zealand Falls hut. You'll climb Webster Cliffs and Mount Webster, Mount Jackson, Mount Pierce, Mount Washington, which of course you guys have all heard of. Be careful of the weather. I mean that. And it's equally difficult to climb up and over Mount Madison. Guys, be wary of Mount Madison. It is hard. It's harder, in my opinion, than climbing Mount Washington, and it's very slippery, and the weather is just as volatile up there as it is on Washington. Now, you can also go into the town of Gorham, New Hampshire when you're doing this section, because it actually kind of loops around. You can make 2 stops, one in the middle of your trip and one at the end of your trip in Gorham, if you would like to, before you hike out of Pinkham Notch into the Wildcats, which are considered the steepest mile on the Appalachian Trail. It's basically just some really fun hand-over-hand climbing, but if you've done the rest of the Whites, it's nothing you can't handle. You'll also go over the Carters, and then kind of post the Whites is Mount Height, which has absolutely beautiful views back towards the Presidential Range, and Mount Washington, which is a very easily recognizable summit if it is not in a cloud, and then out towards Maine, where you'll be hiking next if you're through hiking, or if you're turning your eyes towards continuing your sections up north, that's where you're headed. And you'll also climb over Mount Moriah. So this is a very beautiful, very fun, very dangerous section of the trail. But if you are feeling froggy on your section hike, or you're just looking to start lashing, or you just want a challenge, this is the section for you. Just be aware you will be moving slowly. You need to make sure that you have the right gear while you are up there, and then always make sure to have some cash in your pocket in case you need to emergency camp at a hut or something like that. So there you go, guys. That's if you want to hike the Whites. Okay, so if you guys watched my AT for Weekend Warriors video where I presented the shorter sections of trail that you could potentially do over a 2 to 4 day weekend, you will know that I had a best of Maine section, because I absolutely love Maine. I loved hiking there. I loved how beautiful it was. And of course, it's a very sentimental state if you've through hiked the trail. So this is kind of the best of Maine in 2 different sections for you guys. So the first section I want to tell you about is Southern Maine. Now, this is a section I would recommend starting in Rangeley, Maine at mile marker 1976.8, or you can start at Maine Route 4, which is just up the road from Rangeley and is actually on the trail. There is a parking lot there, and ending at East Flagstaff Road at mile marker 2025.6. So this is kind of a shorter section of trail. It's 48.8 miles, but it is just as difficult as hiking in the Whites. So don't underestimate Southern Maine, guys. It is just an extension of the Whites. Some fun things that you'll find in this section, the Your Move privy, which is the 2-seater privy with the cribbage board between the thrones, is located at the Piazza Rock Lean-To. So if you want to see that very entertaining privy, or potentially poop with friends, you can stop in there on your hike. You also get to conquer the beautiful Saddleback Mountains, which have fantastic views and honestly are really fun to climb up and over, as well as their friend the Horn. You can also climb up and over Spalding Mountain, Sugarloaf Mountain, again, another ski mountain, and hit the Crockers. You can stay at a lovely hostel called Hostel of Maine, or Home for short, if you want to get off at Maine Route 27. And they do offer a southbound slack pack of the Bigelows, which I did on my 2023 thru hike, because the Bigelows are the next beast that you will conquer. And it is 17 very, very, very hard miles with absolutely gorgeous views. It's just a beautiful little section of trail, but like I said, don't underestimate the difficulty. It is hard hiking for beautiful views. Okay, and the second and final part of Maine that I want to tell you about is the 100-mile wilderness. Now this starts at Monson, Maine at mile marker 2082.7, which is also Maine Route 15, will take you into town, and there's a parking area there right at the start of the 100-mile wilderness. And it basically ends at A-Ball Bridge at mile marker 2182.3. Although if you are feeling froggy and have extra time, you can extend an extra 20 or so miles to get to the base of Katahdin, climb up Mount Katahdin, and then of course do the obligatory climb down Mount Katahdin. So this is a 99.6 mile section if you stop at A-Ball Bridge, or potentially up to about 115 or so, depending on which path you take down Mount Katahdin, section if you choose to extend all the way to the northern terminus of the Appalachian Trail. Now, if you're starting in Monson, Maine, I definitely recommend that you stop at two places. One is the historic Shaw's Hiker Hostel in Maine. They have a fantastic pancake breakfast there, as well as people who are super knowledgeable about the trail, specifically the 100-mile wilderness, and finishing at Mount Katahdin. Now, the second place I recommend stopping if you happen to start in Monson is the AT Trail Center there, because the staffers at that trail center are really good about giving out current weather conditions, trail reports, and giving you advice for not just hiking through the 100-mile wilderness, but also planning your summit of Mount Katahdin if you're choosing to go that far on this section. Now, when you start the 100-mile wilderness, you are going to see so many beautiful places. Like the 100-mile wilderness is just absolutely gorgeous wilderness. And honestly, it's a very cruisy section of trail compared to the rest of the Appalachian Trail, especially when you're coming out of southern Maine, which is kind of an extension of the Whites, some of the hardest hiking you're going to do on trail. Now, in the 100-mile wilderness, you'll be able to see the beautiful and very tall Little Wilson Falls. You encounter lots of streams, ponds, and bogs, and you will have a lot of stream crossings. Some of them you will be passable, some of them will be impassable. So that's why, in my opinion, I would definitely stop in at the Monson AT Center before going into the 100-mile wilderness. You can get the most current stream crossing and weather reports before you go in. There are options for kind of long back road, logging road walks around certain stream crossings, but just remember, it is not worth your life to go across a stream if it is too high or too fast or too dangerous for you to cross. So just bear that in mind when you're planning your hike through the 100-mile. You'll get to go across the barren ledges. You get to go through the Hermitage, which is a beautiful old growth forest in the middle of the 100-mile wilderness. If you would like to, you can blue blaze the Gulf Haggis side trail, where you get to see a lot of beautiful waterfalls and kind of they call it like the miniature Grand Canyon of Maine. You can stop in at Antlers campsite to camp. It's a beautiful campsite in the 100-mile wilderness. You can also get a lot of different views of Mount Katahdin depending on your weather conditions. And of course, if you are through hiking or even finishing your lash or just doing this as a section, seeing Mount Katahdin is just so stunning and emotional. You can do some beach walks through the 100-mile wilderness and camp on the beach if you happen to be there at the time you want to set up camp, but it's just absolutely beautiful. And then when you come out of the 100-mile wilderness and walk across A-Ball Bridge, you get that gorgeous postcard view of Mount Katahdin from the bridge. So it's just a great way to end your hike, or if you choose to extend, that little 10-mile portion between A-Ball Bridge and the base of Mount Katahdin is filled with gorgeous waterfalls and streams, and it's very cruisy trail, especially coming out of the 100-mile wilderness. And then of course, if you would like to extend your hike to include the northern terminus of the Appalachian Trail with its famous brown sign where you can lift your trekking poles above your head and congratulate yourself on a section or through hike well done, you can move on to Mount Katahdin as well. All right, so this has been the AT for LASHers. I hope this helps you guys in planning your longer section hikes of the Appalachian Trail, or even potentially setting up for your thru hike. If you have any questions or comments or any suggestions for lash size sections of trail, feel free to drop them below. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, and as always, happy trails, everyone.